So I want to talk about like documentation during a pandemic, since I guess it's been on everyone's mind lately. Um, and it's kind of cool for tech writers to actually have a big role in this now, because some other people have mentioned some talks. Sometimes it's hard to get recognition as a writer. So I thought it was kind of cool to share the experience that I had along with some of my team members. A little background: I'm Nick van der Auwermeulen. I'm a tech writer at Google. I started to help during the pandemic with a project called Baseline, which is run by Verily, which is a company from Google that does life health studies. So they quickly shifted, when this pandemic started, to help, with the whole testing around COVID. So Project Baseline and the COVID-19 program is a COVID testing platform that supports individuals, from screening to testing and the receipt of the results. So like as soon as they shifted, they were doing other things. They were doing health studies in general before this pandemic. So this company quickly shifted to help with the cause, and they requested help from many people, from writers and just people from across Google in general. So we came around as writers and actually helped a little bit with that. So one of the big things they needed to do was get hundreds of testing sites up and running, as quickly as possible. So they needed, the things we identified they needed help with was standardized processes for testing and reporting, documentation processing for those sites, documentation for health forms, privacy, consent, as well as dashboards for all of these metrics. So people from all roles started to help on this, and it was fun to be able to actually help. We identified the big issue was just get as many testing sites operational quickly. This is also meeting, guidelines from state and federal authorities. So there was a lot of stuff around that, a lot of churn. And what our big goal was just to be scalable for all these test sites and get all the training and documentation ready, along with feedback.
We can't see your slides.
Oh, you can't? Oh.
Sorry.
Oh. Oops.
I didn't want to waste your time, but in case
no worries.
Crucial,
sorry about that. We identified these problems, and one of the big things we identified was documentation can make a huge impact on all of this, because we're trying to scale this and involve a lot of people that were willing to give their time, to help in this important cause. And the big thing that would unify everyone was just documentation and good processes around that documentation. We also created a lot of training content that include translations for processes, also to respond to people's feedback. This was including the people that were actually working on all these testing sites. I'm sure a lot of people have actually gone to get tested, given all of this. So I'm sure people have noticed, like, there's a lot of people that are involved in getting all of this up and running. And there's a lot of people doing this in the background as well. When we joined, this was me and a fellow writer from my team at Google. We did a 6-week cycle, creating training materials. We created processes for this team. There was a lot of stuff they didn't have. A lot of the things they actually had to rely a lot on the single engineers, and these engineers were overworked. So we actually helped them do releases. We helped them make that connection between product and program teams. A lot of people do as writers sometimes, even though it's technically, I guess, out of our scope sometimes, but I think most writers, we have done this. And we release a lot of guides. All these guides are actually available on the link below if anyone's actually interested. This covers a lot of the processes and how all these testing sites are coming up, what site leads have to do to get things working, and just like how it works in the community. All of this is meant to be transparent for everyone, and also it helps partners, set up and get testing sites going. So like when we did all this, a lot of team members actually went and created a lot of these test sites. Here's a picture of some of these test sites here in the Bay Area where I'm based. They set up sites throughout California and the rest of the US. And all of this is, again, it's all transparent, and it's meant to be, let's get people tested. Let's hopefully, stop this pandemic, flatten the curve as much as we can. And it was definitely cool to be able to get that and help with documentation. One of the metrics that we actually liked that actually proved, I think, that documentation was very impactful here. When we started, there was about 25 testing sites. This was in March 2020. when we were done with the launch, we had about 280 testing sites. So that was a pretty big increase overall. And all of this, there was a huge help from documentation itself. So we addressed people's concerns, we iterated over documentation, and we just kept writing and improving it based on users' needs. So this was like very similar to just typical documentation. So yeah, there's a little more information if people are interested. There's a link to the slides themselves if anyone's interested about more info about finalized docs as well. And yeah, hopefully, yeah, people found this talk interesting. And yeah, thanks for having me talk.
Thank you so much, Nick. It does seem as though the slides, despite showing in one window, perhaps didn't show the actual presentation. So if you don't mind sharing, this is just lightning talks. It's how it works. Slides do or do not. It's what they do.